Hello, um, I'm Tiana, and this is the first episode of Review It. And for my first episode, I'm going to start talking about a Studio Ghibli film that is one of my favorites. This film is Howl's Moving Castle. I know some people have heard of it, and some people haven't. Some people have also read the book, and personally, I think the movie is Hal Jenkins' propaganda, but I'm going to go talk about that for the next few minutes or so. And for starters, I'm going to summarize it all. So the movie is about this girl named Sophie Hatter who works in a hat shop, but she's unsatisfied with her life. So then this woman named the Witch of the West, she comes in and then turns Sophie into an old woman, and which leads to Sophie meeting Howl and going on an adventure with him, which ends up with them falling in love and, all that other good stuff. So, for starters, my review is gonna have a lot of, comparison and contrast from the book and the movie. And, I like the movie as it is, as a Studio Ghibli film. It's great as a Studio Ghibli film. It has the essence of it, and overall, it's just a good movie. But but you should not watch it in the same lens as you read the book and think that they're the same thing. They have two totally different stories that they're trying to tell. For starters, in the movie, a lot of it's more about true love and characters like the prince is changed to being a love interest of Sophie's and is considered her one true love. Sorry for all the people who haven't watched the movie. This is spoilers. I mean, they're 18 years old spoilers, but spoilers nonetheless. But anyways, he goes from being a character who's just like a side character that doesn't really have any plot or anything to becoming the supposed love interest. There's air quotes for that because Sophie doesn't end up with him anyway, so it's just, yeah, he's a love interest that's not really a love interest, and that's how it is. And Sophie is the damsel in distress, I would say, but not the damsel in distress, because she has points where she's the one saving Howl, but overall he's still the one who has to save her from her curse and her inner problems, like how she feels about herself. He's the one who has to lift her up and has to make her feel good about herself. And it's okay. I mean, it's a Studio Ghibli film, so of course it's just both of them falling in love. But in the book, it's more her figuring out how to love herself and how to become a better person on her own without Howl. Howl is just a side character that, is there. He's a main character, but he's like a side character in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. And I know my thoughts are all over the place, but going on to Howl and why I call this movie Howl Propaganda. Yeah, so going on to Howl and why I call this Howl Propaganda is because Hal Jenkins is a generally not horrible, but he's not a good person in the book. But in the movie, he's this guy who's caring. He always thinks about Sophie. He even went out of his way to go look for her in the future when she told him to. Even though she was a complete and total stranger, he still went out and looked for her and basically saved her life. He was just all into her. He loved her, and he was just going out of his way to do things for her. And he's just a sweetheart in the movie. And, like, girls are falling over him. But in the book, he's a trash of a man. First of all, he's a coward. Second of all, he's a playboy. In fact, he goes and tries to seduce Sophie's sister within the first few times of meeting her. But then, later on, we find out that he was also just trying to get information about Sophie. Which is good, I guess, but, you know, even his sister, which he doesn't have a sister in the movie, but his sister in the book is over here like, you're a trash person. You don't have a job. You have a degree. You have a doctorate, but you can't find a job and you can't do anything. And you just come into my house every 6 months or so to give my children presents and then leave. And then he's so vain within the books. Like, I mean, like, I know this scene happens in the movie too, but who calls on the spirits of darkness just because your hair accidentally got dyed pink? And then, like, later on, he's like, okay, the pink looks good on me. I look like an angel. And it's crazy. Howl is not the best. Oh, not even to go on to the fact that in the book later on, he starts flirting with his nephew's teacher because he wants to make Sophie jealous. If that has anything to tell you about how well propaganda, that should be it. That should be the main thing. I mean, I could go on and all day about how Howl acts, but, you know, I will not. That will be boring, and honestly, nobody wants to hear that. But then we go on to characters like Marco, yeah, that's the little kid in the movie. So his character felt really unnecessary and unimportant compared to his counterpart. Like, I felt like Marco wasn't needed there. He just was there because they had Michael in the book and they didn't know how to put him in there. So, yeah, he was just a little kid hanging out around them, even though his book counterpart had a whole storyline of being his apprentice and being the one that takes care of Hal, basically, as a parent. And that he was also dating Sophie's sister. And it has to go into the whole idea that the oldest doesn't get what they want, and they are going to have the worst life out of everything. But overall, Markle was just there. Calcifer, on the other hand, one of my favorite characters. To this day, he lived up to his book counterpart. He stayed the same, pretty much. He's just this funny fire demon who supposedly considers himself evil, but he's just a softie at heart. Like, he even comes back and then makes excuses about it, talking about how it's going to rain, even though he just likes to be with Hal and Sophie. Even going on and, like, further in the other books, he stays with Sophie and Hal, even though he's like a free shooting star, and he can live for like thousands of more years. But he stays with them even though he's out of his contract and he can do whatever he wants. And I guess next character we would go to is the Witch of the Waste, who is a supporting character, but her importance to the story, it makes it, the movie and the trailers make her seem out to be this big character that's going to mean more than she actually did. Like, she was supposed to be the main antagonist, but ended up halfway through a 2-hour movie, she becomes just a side character that helps Sophie realize her feelings for Howl. Like, she was this big bad and overset woman, which I would say her being this overset woman has problems of its own, which I have not mentioned, which I want to mention, but I don't know how how well it's gonna go over, because Disney has this thing where they like to make people of a larger body type into villains, or either POC people into villains. And she's just one of those characters that I would say fit into that category, because her book counterpart was this skinny, pretty woman who constantly dyed her hair. And it was just a weird seeing her as a character that looked totally different from herself. But then she goes on to become, like, halfway through the movie, she's just this lazy, overset woman who's just here to be comic relief at most, and to smoke, and to tell Sophie that she's in love with Howl. Pretty much it. Like, it was like they set up this villain to not be a villain, only for us to go into this other older woman who is now the villain, who in the books, she wasn't even a woman. They kind of conjoined two different characters. It was Howl's teacher in the book and Wizard Solomon that they combined together and turned it into one person and made it a villain at that. Because both of these characters weren't supposed to be villains, but then they turned it into a villain. And it was just kind of unnecessary, because she became the villain out of nowhere. And it was just like, oh, hello, we're an hour and 30 minutes in, and we have a new villain, the main villain, supposedly, who's been running the show. And now she's trying to kill all of us with faceless blobs. Great. Even in 2004, this was little out there. But whatever. They did that, and there's nothing really to say about her, because she was just that villain who in the end became good, because, Howl has his heart. So there's nothing to be good or bad. There's no evil in the world now. They stopped the war because Howl found his heart. Like, that's great and all. There's no real other characters I can talk about, because they cut out a lot of book characters for the movie. But, like, they really cut out Fanny, Martha, Letty, Michael, technically. They cut out the prince, really. I mean, he's a scarecrow, but in the movie, but they cut him out. They cut out the house teacher. They cut out Miss Anagorian. They cut out Megan. They cut out his nephews and his niece. So it was just a lot that they cut out just to make this simple. They make the story more simpler and less complex than it was, because I don't think they were moving on with the sequel, which the sequel gets even better. Howl becomes a genie, Sophie's a cat, and then there's a flying rug with emotions that likes to be flirted with. But overall, the movie is great. But it's just not something you need to dig too deep into, to analyze too deeply. Like, it has great aesthetics and everything, but it's just a kids movie overall. And that's what it's meant to be. A kids movie about two people falling in love, and it's a subtle falling in love too. And it's cute, and it also has that whole message that your true love doesn't have to be your true love. And I don't really know what else to say about it, but overall, this is my first review. I'll try to get better as time goes on. Most likely, my reviews are going to turn into rants depending on what I'm watching at the time. But that's Review It. And I'm Tiana or Anna. Depends on how you feel and who you are. But thank you for listening.